In this morning's Business Insight, women's pay in Greater Cincinnati on average comes up far short of pay for their male peers. That's according to a study released last month by the Greater Cincinnati Foundation's Women's Fund and conducted by the University of Cincinnati's Economic Center. To read the study for yourself and access pay equity tools you can use in your office, you can visit www.cincinnatiwomen'sfund.org/payequity. We are joined this morning by Megan Cummings, Executive Director of the Women's Fund of the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, and Julie Heath, the Director of UC Economic Center. They are in the studio with Business Watch producer Kelly Leon. Megan, Julie, and Kelly.
Megan, Dr. Heath, thank you so much for being here, both of you. This is the first time a study like this has been conducted in Cincinnati, to our understanding.
That's right.
Let's quickly run through some of the findings so viewers can grasp them. The first point, the first key finding that you made was that in the Cincinnati MSA, women make 80 cents on the dollar when compared to men. Next point, education is not the great equalizer, as I think a lot of people would think. Third key finding, women are rewarded less for positive work attributes like age, education, hours worked, that sort of thing. And then the fourth key finding is wages for men and women of color are much lower across the board. So those are the four key findings. There's so much to this and we have to boil it down. Talk about those findings. What surprised you?
Well, I think what surprised me the most is that you noted the 80 cents on the dollar, and we hear a lot of those kinds of comparisons in the media. It's important to know that those are averages, but what goes into our wage is more than just an average. What goes into our wage, determining anybody's wage, is what levels of positive attributes do you have? How much education do you have? How many hours a week do you work? That kind of thing. But the other component is what's your return on those attributes? So if you get another year of education, you get 5% more in your wage. So when we just look at averages, we can't tell which of those two factors is having the biggest impact. And so what we did in this study is we pulled those apart so that we could see how much is due to you and I having different levels of education and how much is it due to you get a higher return on your education than I do.
Gotcha.
And what was surprising was how much was due to the difference in return.
Megan, what about you?
For me, what was really surprising, and I think we understand that education is a great equalizer and can move people forward, but in this study, especially for women who have a bachelor's degree or an advanced degree, that wage gap gets even larger when you have an advanced degree. And so that can mean a lot over the course of a career. It can mean almost $500,000 difference in wage accumulation by the end of your career for men and women who are both holding an advanced degree. So I think that was a wake-up call to a lot of people, that we think once you get that degree, you're set, but we're seeing the biggest gaps in higher educated people.
Interesting. And what about those positive work attributes that you talked about? I thought that was interesting.
Well, in terms of, so one of the challenges of pulling those two threads that I talked about apart is that even though we can say, well, we look at differences in attributes and think, well, that makes sense.
Right.
You know, it makes sense if one person has more education than another, they'd get a higher wage. In our sample, and again, this was Cincinnati MSA, women in fact have more education than men do, and yet get a lower wage. So as Megan said, when we split that out by education, that difference is even more profound.
So what? What do we do now with this? Like, this is such great information. And again, people can go to the website and download the study, read it themselves. We're just getting a bit of it. But what should we be doing now with regard to what you found?
So that's the question everyone's asking. So what do we do now? So first, we've put together a series of resources on our website, which the address is up there, CincinnatiWomen'sFund.org, pay equity.
We can put up again so people know where to go.
Exactly. So, and it helps you ask some questions in your own organization. It's, again, as Julie said, it's different than just looking at the average male wages and female wages. So we put up some resources so you can get to that level of understanding of what's going on in your organization. And those questions are a start, but sometimes it requires an even deeper economic analysis of what's going on in your company versus, you know, to look at things like tenure and starting salaries and some things that are even a little bit more subtle than that. How do negotiations, is that a thing that people do in your company, and how does that affect men and women differently?
And I would think just the fact that you've brought this to our attention as a community, and just the fact that we're talking about it, will hopefully have some positive results, because if you don't talk about it, you're never going to do anything about it.
Right.
That's right. And I think it's important to note that difference in return that we talked about, we don't attribute that to discrimination. We say that our model cannot explain that. And that covers a lot of things. That covers data limitations, as Megan said. An important component is how long have you worked at this particular job? And our data set didn't allow us to pull that out. So there are things that if we could have included it in the model, that gap would have shrunk.
And if we had more time, we could go on and on about this. Please look at the website. Dr. Julie Heath, Megan Cummings, thank you guys so much for being here and talking about this.
Thank you.